Her billionaire husband brought his mistress to brunch. She left with the prenup. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The cruelest betrayals do not always arrive in darkness. Sometimes they walk into a five-star brunch smiling, wearing perfume, and holding the hand of the man who promised to protect you. Naomi Brooks noticed the silence before she noticed the woman. It settled over the private dining room of the Langford Hotel like frost on crystal, soft at first, then impossible to ignore. Sunlight poured through the tall Manhattan windows, turning the silverware bright and the champagne flutes golden, while 12 members of the Prescott family sat around a table arranged with white roses, smoked salmon, warm croissants, and the kind of effortless wealth that made even cruelty look polished. Naomi had dressed carefully that morning in a cream midi dress and pearl earrings, her deep brown skin glowing under the soft light, her posture calm, her smile practiced but sincere. She had believed, because she was still trying to believe, that this brunch was only another family obligation, another Sunday performance where she would sit beside William Prescott, answer questions about the foundation, compliment his mother's garden club fundraiser, and pretend not to feel the distance growing between her and the man she had married 7 years ago. Then the double doors opened, and William walked in late. Not alone. Madison Vale came beside him in a pale blue dress that looked too intentional to be accidental, her blonde hair falling over one shoulder, one hand resting lightly on William's arm, as if she had earned the right to be there. The room did not gasp. That would have been kinder. Instead, it held its breath. William's mother lowered her coffee cup without drinking. His uncle looked down at his phone. A cousin shifted in his chair and suddenly became fascinated by the butter knife beside his plate. Naomi did not move. Her fingers remained around the stem of her water glass, steady, elegant, almost peaceful. William's gray eyes found hers across the table, and for one brief second, something like caution flickered through his face. Then pride covered it. Pride always came easily to men who mistook silence for surrender. "Everyone," William said, his voice smooth enough for boardrooms and charity stages, "I'd like you to meet Madison Vale. She has been an important part of my life for some time now." The words landed softly, but they cut with precision. Madison smiled, not wide, not obvious, just enough to suggest victory without appearing rude. Naomi looked at her husband, then at the empty chair beside him that should have been hers in every room, every promise, every version of their life. She could feel every eye avoiding her, and somehow that hurt more than the introduction itself. No one said her name. No one defended the vows they had applauded at St. Bartholomew's. No one remembered the woman who had stood beside William when Prescott Holdings was one missed payment away from collapse, when she had spent sleepless nights reviewing numbers, calling investors, saving the empire that now treated her like decoration. William pulled out a chair for Madison. That small courtesy, so public and so deliberate, told Naomi everything the speech had not. She placed her glass down with a soft click. The sound was barely louder than a whisper, yet it seemed to travel through the entire room. Madison tilted her head, her voice sweet in the way sugar can hide poison. "Naomi, I hope this isn't uncomfortable." William thought it was time everyone stopped pretending. For the first time that morning, Naomi smiled. Not warmly, not bitterly, just enough to reveal that something inside her had not broken, it had awakened. She reached for the white leather handbag resting beside her chair, the one William had bought her for an anniversary he had forgotten until his assistant reminded him. From it, she removed a sealed ivory envelope, clean and heavy, with William Prescott's name written across the front in her careful handwriting. His expression changed. Only slightly, but Naomi saw it. She had spent years studying the shifts in his face, learning the weather of his moods, surviving the winters of his indifference. "Naomi," he said quietly, warning hidden under charm, "this is not the place." She rose, unhurried, every movement graceful enough to silence the room more completely than anger ever could. "You're right," she said, her voice calm, low, and clear. "This was never the place for a marriage to end. But you brought your confession to brunch, William. So I brought the prenup. The word moved through the table like a candle being blown out. Madison's smile faltered. William stared at the envelope as if it had become a living thing. Naomi set it beside his plate, between the untouched orange juice and the folded linen napkin embroidered with the Prescott crest. Then she looked at him, not as a wife begging to be chosen, but as a woman finally choosing herself. "Did you bring her here to humiliate me?" she asked. "Or did you forget that paper remembers what people try to deny?" No one spoke. Outside, taxis moved along Fifth Avenue. Inside, William Prescott, billionaire, king of glass towers and whispered deals, sat frozen before the one document he had once believed would protect only him. Naomi lifted her coat from the back of her chair, turned toward the door, and walked away with the kind of dignity no mistress, no fortune, and no family name could ever take from her. By the time Naomi reached the lobby, the polished calm she had carried through the private dining room had become something heavier, something older than anger. The Langford Hotel moved around her in quiet luxury, bellmen guiding rolling suitcases across marble floors, tourists admiring the chandelier, a pianist near the lounge playing a soft version of a song she and William had once danced to at a winter fundraiser in Boston. She did not stop. She did not look back. Outside, the February air struck her face with a clean coldness that felt almost merciful. For 7 years, people had called her fortunate. They said it at galas, in society columns, behind champagne, glasses, and charity programs. Naomi Brooks, the graceful black woman who had married into one of New York's oldest billionaire families. They said it as if William had rescued her from an ordinary life, as if her degree from Howard University, her years in corporate finance, her discipline, her intelligence, and her relentless work had been decorative details instead of the foundation beneath so much of his success. In the beginning, even she had wanted to believe the story was kinder than that. William had met her at a financial literacy fundraiser in Brooklyn, where she was teaching single mothers how to rebuild credit, negotiate salaries, and read loan documents before signing them. He had arrived late, surrounded by assistants and cameras, a man used to being admired before he spoke. But that night, he had listened. Truly listened. After her presentation, he found her near the coffee station and told her she explained money like it had a soul. Naomi had laughed then, surprised by the softness in his voice. "Money does have a soul," she told him. "It shows what people fear, what they value, and who they are willing to forget." He looked at her as if no one had ever spoken to him that way. Their courtship became a public fascination by accident. William took her to small restaurants in Harlem instead of private clubs. Naomi brought him to Sunday dinner at Aunt Denise's brownstone in Bedford-Stuyvesant, where he learned to pass plates before serving himself and to say thank you like he meant it. He sent books instead of flowers after their third date, because she had mentioned that roses died too quickly. When he proposed beneath the old stone arch in Central Park, snow falling gently around them, Naomi believed she was not entering his world as a guest. She believed they were building a new one together. The prenup came 3 weeks before the wedding, thick as a magazine, placed on a conference table between them like a test no one wanted to name. William said it was family policy. His lawyers said it was standard. His mother said women who loved sincerely did not worry about paper. Naomi remembered the humiliation of that sentence more clearly than the diamond. On her finger, she signed, but only after reading every page, asking every question, and demanding language that protected dignity as much as assets. William had smiled then, amused, almost proud. "You really do read everything," he said. "Always," she replied. "That is how people survive rooms where they are underestimated." For a while, their marriage looked beautiful because parts of it truly were. They bought a home overlooking the Hudson River. They hosted scholarship dinners. They built the Prescott Family Equity Fund after Naomi convinced William that legacy meant nothing if it did not open doors for people locked outside them. When Prescott Holdings nearly collapsed during a failed hotel acquisition in Miami, it was Naomi who stayed awake for 3 straight nights, building the restructuring plan that saved 3,000 jobs and preserved William's reputation. But success has a way of revealing what love sometimes hides. The more powerful William became, the smaller he expected Naomi to stand beside him. Her advice became interference. Her questions became criticism. Her public warmth became useful, but her private honesty became inconvenient. At dinners, he interrupted her. At meetings, he repeated her ideas in his own voice and accepted the praise. At home, he filled the silence with work calls, distant apologies, and expensive gifts that arrived in velvet boxes when what she needed was respect. Naomi kept trying, not because she was weak, but because marriage had meant something sacred to her. She had been raised to repair what could be repaired, to speak with grace before judgment, to remember that every person was more than their worst season. Yet grace without boundaries slowly becomes a cage. In the back seat of the Blacktown car waiting at the curb, Naomi finally allowed her hands to tremble. Not from fear, from release. Her phone lit up with William's name once, then twice, then again. She watched it glow against the leather seat and let it fade each time. Through the window, Manhattan blurred into silver and stone. Somewhere behind her, William was opening the envelope. Somewhere ahead of her, a life she had postponed for too long was beginning to breathe. Naomi touched the empty place where her wedding ring rested against her skin, then gently slid it from her finger and placed it inside her purse. Beside the copy of the agreement he had forgotten, she understood better than anyone. The city moved forward. So did she. Inside the private dining room of the Langford Hotel, William Prescott did not open the envelope right away. He stared at it as though Naomi had placed a mirror beside his plate, and he was not ready to see what kind of man looked back. Around him, the brunch had lost its music. Forks rested untouched beside plates of eggs Benedict and sliced fruit. His mother, Eleanor Prescott, sat perfectly still beneath her pearls, her face pale with the shock of a woman who had spent her life believing that money could keep discomfort outside the door. Madison Vale kept her smile in place for nearly 10 seconds before it began to fade at the edges. "William," she said softly, leaning closer. "What is she talking about?" But William did not answer. His fingers moved to the flap of the envelope, then stopped. He remembered the day Naomi had insisted on changing the agreement. The memory returned with cruel clarity. A conference room high above Park Avenue, 3 attorneys in dark suits, his father's old watch heavy on his wrist, and Naomi sitting across from him in a navy dress, calm as dawn. She had not cried. She had not accused. She had simply turned to page 27 and tapped one paragraph with a silver pen. "This clause protects your family assets," she had said. "I understand that. But where is the clause that protects my name?" His attorney had cleared his throat, uncomfortable. William had almost laughed, not because he meant to be unkind, but because he had been raised to believe reputation was something families like his own, not something women like Naomi had to defend. "Your name?" he had asked. Naomi looked at him then, and something in her eyes had made the room quiet. "Yes, William. My name. My work. My dignity. If I am expected to stand beside your family in public, then I will not be left unprotected if that same public stage is ever used to shame me." In the end, he agreed because he was in love, because he thought it would never matter, and because men who believe they will always be honorable rarely fear the price of dishonor. The revised prenup included a morality clause, a public humiliation clause, and a charitable stewardship clause that gave Naomi independent control over any philanthropic initiative she created, funded, or expanded through measurable personal contribution. It also included compensation rights if either spouse knowingly damaged the other's public or professional reputation through infidelity, deception, or intentional exposure to scandal. At the time, William had considered it symbolic. A gesture, a paragraph written for peace. Now the paper felt heavier than the hotel itself. Eleanor's voice cut through the silence, low and sharp. "Open it." William glanced at his mother. For once, her command did not steady him. He slid one finger beneath the seal and removed a folded legal notice, crisp, formal, merciless in its clarity. At the top was the letterhead of Whitman and Lowe family law. Beneath it, Grace Whitman's signature appeared in dark blue ink. William read the first line, and the color drained from his face. Naomi Brooks Prescott was invoking the agreement effective immediately. She was filing for legal separation. She was requesting independent control of the Prescott Family Equity Fund. She was preserving all records related to marital misconduct, reputational damage, and the deliberate introduction of Madison Vale into a family and donor event. She was asking that all communication go through counsel. Madison drew back as if the name on the page had turned cold. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. But no one looked convinced, not even her. William kept reading, and with every sentence, the room around him became less familiar. The table, the flowers, the silver, the quiet relatives who had chosen cowardice over decency. All of it seemed to tilt under the weight of one truth. Naomi had not walked out empty-handed. She had walked out prepared. Across town, Naomi sat in Grace Whitman's office on Madison Avenue, her coat folded neatly over her lap, her wedding ring resting inside a small velvet pouch. Grace was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair, intelligent eyes, and the kind of calm that came from decades of watching powerful people discover that the law did not kneel before them. "You understand what happens next," Grace said gently. "He will try charm first, then pressure, then reputation. Men like William rarely believe a woman means goodbye until goodbye has a filing number." Naomi looked toward the window, where the city moved in clean vertical lines of glass and winter light. "I do not want to destroy him," she said. Grace nodded. "Then we will not. We will protect you." Naomi breathed in slowly. That was the difference. Revenge wanted ruins. Protection wanted truth. For years, she had mistaken endurance for love, silence for grace, and sacrifice for loyalty. Now, seated in a quiet office with the law on one side and her own name on the other, Naomi finally understood that dignity was not something a husband gave her when he was kind. It was something she had carried all along, waiting for the day she would stop asking permission to defend it. By late afternoon, the story had already begun to move without Naomi's permission, which was how stories often moved when wealth was involved. Not as truth, but as smoke. A society columnist posted that William Prescott had appeared at a family brunch with a close business associate, while his wife departed unexpectedly. A financial gossip account hinted at marital strain. Someone from the hotel leaked that a legal envelope had been placed on the table. By 6 o'clock, Naomi's name was trending in circles that had once praised her gowns, her speeches, her careful smile beside William at charity events. She watched none of it. Her phone remained face down on Aunt Denise Carter's kitchen table in Bedford-Stuyvesant, beside a chipped blue mug filled with ginger tea and a plate of butter cookies that Denise had made because comfort, in her house, always arrived warm. The brownstone smelled of lemon polish, cinnamon, and old books. It was the first place Naomi had gone after leaving Grace Whitman's office, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she needed to remember who she was. Before the Prescott name had taught strangers to mispronounce her worth. Aunt Denise stood at the stove in a soft gray sweater, stirring soup with the patience of a woman who knew that heartbreak could not be rushed but still needed feeding. "You ate anything today, baby?" she asked without turning around. Naomi sat very straight, both hands around the mug. "Not really." Denise nodded, as if that answer had confirmed everything. "Then we start there." The kindness nearly undid her. Not the brunch, not Madison's smile, not William's legal panic. It was the simple act of being cared for without performing strength that made Naomi close her eyes. For 7 years, she had been praised for her composure. Elegant Naomi. Gracious Naomi. The woman who could stand under chandeliers while donors questioned her credentials, smile through jokes about affirmative action, and translate insult into politeness before it touched the floor. She had learned how to survive rooms where people called her impressive when they meant unexpected, articulate when they meant surprising, lucky when they meant undeserving. William had not invented that world, but he had promised, once, to be the place where she no longer had to survive it. That was the promise he had broken long before he arrived with Madison. Her phone buzzed again. Denise glanced at it. "Him." Naomi nodded. The screen lit with William's name, followed by a message preview that began with, "We need to talk before this gets out of hand." Naomi almost laughed, but the sound stayed in her chest. Out of hand. That was what powerful people called consequences when they reached the right address. Another message arrived, this one from Eleanor Prescott. "You are embarrassing this family. Please act with dignity." Naomi looked at the words for a long time. Then she turned the phone off. Denise set a bowl of soup in front of her and sat down across the table. "Dignity is not silence," she said softly. "Do not let anyone confuse the two." Naomi opened her eyes. The kitchen window reflected her face back at her, tired but still whole, framed by the fading gold of winter evening. "I keep thinking about the table," she admitted. Not him. Not even her. The table. All those people watching. Everyone knew what he was doing, and no one said one word. Denise reached across and covered Naomi's hand with her own. Some people are not quiet because they are kind. They are quiet because the truth would cost them comfort. The sentence settled deep. Naomi thought of the hotel room, the lowered eyes, the polished forks, the expensive cowardice wrapped in linen napkins. She thought of Madison, too, and felt something almost like pity beneath the hurt. Madison believed she had won a man, a lifestyle, a place at a table. She had not yet understood that a table built on someone else's humiliation would one day require her own. Across Manhattan, William sat alone in his penthouse study, the legal notice spread open on his desk, Madison's calls unanswered, his mother's anger echoing through the voicemail he refused to replay. For the first time in years, the room felt too large. Naomi's absence had weight. It lived in the untouched books on the shelf, the framed photograph from their first foundation gala, the navy throw blanket she used during late nights when she reviewed grant applications while he slept. He had expected outrage, tears, a scene he could manage. He had not expected procedure. He had not expected discipline. He had not expected the woman he underestimated to leave him with nothing to negotiate except the truth. Back in Brooklyn, Naomi lifted the spoon to her lips and tasted the soup, warm and steady and real. Her life had not healed in one afternoon. Her heart had not stopped aching. But something sacred had shifted. She was no longer waiting for the people who watched her pain to decide whether it mattered. She had decided for herself. The next morning, Naomi woke before sunrise in the small guest room at Aunt Denise's brownstone, not because she had slept well, but because her body still remembered the schedule of a life built around someone else's demands. For years, she had risen early to review William's briefing notes, answer foundation emails, and choose outfits that would not give society pages another reason to reduce her to commentary. Now the room was quiet except for the old radiator tapping softly beneath the window and the distant sound of a delivery truck moving down the block. Her cream dress from the brunch hung on the closet door, beautiful and exhausted, carrying the ghost of a table she would never sit at again. Naomi stood in her robe and looked at it for a long time. Then she took it down, folded it carefully, and placed it in a garment bag. Not because she wanted to preserve the pain, but because one day she wanted to remember the exact morning she stopped shrinking. At 8 o'clock, Grace Whitman called. Her voice was calm, precise, and mercifully free of pity. William's attorney contacted my office before 7. They want a private meeting today. Naomi stood by the kitchen window, watching schoolchildren in puffer jackets walk past with backpacks bouncing against their shoulders. No, Grace paused. Then Naomi heard the soft click of a pen. No meeting. No private meeting, Naomi said. Anything he wants to say can go through counsel. Anything he wants to repair can begin with honesty. Grace was silent for a beat, the kind of silence that felt like approval. That is a very clear boundary. Naomi looked at her left hand, bare now except for the faint circle where her wedding ring had rested. I should have learned how to say it sooner. Most people learn boundaries after someone punishes them for having none, Grace said gently. Do not mistake late for too late. By noon, the formal petition had been filed in New York County Supreme Court. The language was clean and restrained, but beneath its professional surface lived 7 years of being dismissed, corrected, displayed, and underestimated. Naomi did not accuse wildly. She documented dates of public appearances, financial contributions to the foundation, emails showing her role in donor strategy, board minutes where her proposals had been adopted under William's signature, photographs from the Langford Hotel brunch confirming Madison's presence at a family donor gathering. The truth did not need screaming. It needed order. William understood that by 3 o'clock, when Prescott Holdings communications director walked into his office with a tablet in her hands and fear in her eyes. We have a problem, she said. William stood near the windows of his midtown tower, looking down at the city he had always believed he could command. I know. No, she replied carefully. I do not think you do. 3 major donors to the equity fund are asking whether Naomi still controls the education initiative. 2 board members want clarification on governance. And the Henderson Group is postponing tomorrow's investment call until the family matter is resolved. Family matter. The phrase tasted bitter. William turned toward his desk, where the legal notice remained open beside a cold cup of coffee. He had read it 9 times. Every time, one line cut deeper. All communication shall proceed through counsel. In 7 years of marriage, Naomi had always answered him, even when hurt, even when tired, even when he offered half an apology and expected full forgiveness. Her silence now was not emptiness. It was a locked door. Madison arrived at the office shortly after 4, wearing sunglasses she did not need and carrying the nervous energy of someone discovering that proximity to power did not guarantee protection. "Your mother will not take my call," she said before the door fully closed. "Reporters are messaging me. Someone posted my name with yours. William, you said this would be handled." He looked at her, really looked, and realized she was frightened not by what had been done to Naomi, but by what might now happen to herself. That recognition did not make him noble. It only made him lonely. "I said a lot of things," he answered. Madison stared at him as if he had become inconvenient. For the first time, William wondered whether Naomi had felt that way beside him for years, loved only when useful, heard only when agreeable. In Brooklyn, Naomi sat at Aunt Denise's dining table with her laptop open, not reading comments, not chasing rumors, but drafting a plan. The first folder she created was titled Financial Dignity Project. Inside it, she listed the things she wished every woman knew before signing her life to someone else's promise. Read every document. Keep personal records. Understand shared assets. Protect your credit. Never confuse access to wealth with ownership of your future, and never let love require legal blindness. Aunt Denise passed behind her and glanced at the screen. "That looks bigger than a divorce." Naomi's fingers hovered above the keyboard. Outside, evening settled softly over the brownstone windows, turning the glass amber. "It has to be," she said. "If all I do is walk away, I survive. If I teach someone else how to walk away safely, then this pain becomes useful." Denise bent and kissed the top of her head. Naomi closed her eyes for one brief second, receiving the blessing without apology. The prenup had opened the door, but what Naomi carried through it would be more powerful than money. It would be knowledge, and knowledge, once shared, had a way of becoming freedom. For the next 6 months, Naomi rebuilt her life in rooms that did not require her to be smaller. She moved from Aunt Denise's guest room into a modest apartment in Brooklyn Heights, 7 blocks from the waterfront, where the windows faced a narrow street lined with brownstones, flower boxes, and families walking dogs before work. It was not the penthouse with its Hudson River view, its imported marble, or its silent rooms polished by people whose names William never bothered to learn. It was better. It was hers. On the first morning there, Naomi made coffee in a chipped ceramic mug she had bought from a street fair, opened her laptop at a second-hand oak table, and began answering messages from women she had never met. They came quietly at first, 1 email, then 5, then dozens. A teacher in Queens who had signed mortgage papers she did not understand because her husband told her not to worry. A nurse in Atlanta trying to rebuild credit after a divorce left her with debts she had never seen. A young mother in Detroit asking whether she was selfish for wanting a separate savings account. Naomi read every word with the careful attention she once gave William's contracts, and with each reply, something inside her steadied. Pain, when kept hidden, becomes weight. Pain, when given purpose, becomes a bridge. The Financial Dignity Project began as a free online workshop from Naomi's kitchen table. She expected 20 people. More than 800 registered in the first week. She taught them how to read agreements line by line, how to keep copies of financial records, how to ask questions without shame, how to understand that love and wisdom were not enemies. Her voice was calm, warm, and precise. She never told women to distrust every partner. She told them to trust themselves enough to understand what they were signing. She told them that respect did not fear transparency. She told them that a healthy marriage should not require one person to be legally blind so the other could feel powerful. Meanwhile, William Prescott discovered that public regret was not the same as private transformation. The settlement negotiations moved slowly because his attorneys kept trying to soften the words that mattered. They wanted misunderstanding instead of humiliation. They wanted personal matter instead of misconduct. They wanted transition instead of consequence. Grace Whitman refused each revision with elegant discipline. Naomi did not attend the early meetings. She had no interest in watching William perform remorse across a conference table. Her absence became its own language. Without her, The Prescott Family Equity Fund began to unravel. Donors asked for Naomi's leadership, not William's explanation. Scholarship families wrote letters saying she was the reason they had trusted the foundation. Former staff members quietly sent documentation proving that Naomi had built most of the programs William had taken credit for at Gallus. Each message did not make her proud in a cruel way. It made her sad in a clear way. She had not imagined her erasure. She had simply become too accustomed to surviving it. One rainy Thursday in September, William finally went to Brooklyn. He did not call first because he knew she would say no. He stood outside Aunt Denise's brownstone under a black umbrella, looking strangely out of place in a neighborhood that did not care about his last name. Denise opened the door, saw him, and did not invite him in. "She is not here," she said. William swallowed, his face thinner than before, his expensive coat darkened by rain. "I need to speak with her." Denise studied him for a long moment. "No, William. You need her to make you feel less guilty. That is different." The words landed without cruelty, which made them harder to escape. He lowered his eyes. "I made mistakes." Denise's expression did not change. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did was a pattern." Across town, Naomi stood before a small audience at a community center in Harlem, wearing a black blazer, gold hoops, and no wedding ring. Women filled the folding chairs, notebooks open, faces lifted toward her with the fragile hope of people who had been told too many times that survival was their only option. Naomi looked at them and felt the old ache in her chest, but it no longer ruled her. "Financial dignity is not about becoming hard," she said. "It is about becoming clear. It is about knowing that love should make your life safer, not smaller." In the back row, an older woman wiped her eyes. A young woman wrote down every word. Naomi paused, letting the silence breathe. For the first time in years, a room was quiet not because people were avoiding the truth, but because they were finally ready to hear it. By October, the name Prescott no longer opened every door the way William had believed it always would. The change did not arrive like a storm. It came quietly, one postponed call, one unanswered invitation, one carefully worded email at a time. A private equity partner in Chicago delayed a hotel acquisition until the company could demonstrate stable leadership. A university president in Philadelphia requested that Naomi, not William, attend the scholarship renewal meeting. Two longtime donors transferred their pledges directly to the Financial Dignity Project, explaining through assistants that they wished to support the person who had always done the work. William read each message alone in his Midtown office, the skyline sharp and silver behind him, and felt the strange humiliation of being seen accurately. For years, he had confused applause with respect. Now, without Naomi standing beside him, the applause sounded thinner. In the beginning, he had blamed everyone except himself. He blamed Madison for coming to the brunch too boldly, as if he had not invited her. He blamed his mother for turning marriage into a performance, as if he had not enjoyed the stage. He blamed Naomi's attorney for making the matter public, as if he had not chosen a public table for a private betrayal. But blame could not keep him warm in the penthouse where Naomi's absence lived in every corner. Her side of the closet was empty. Her books were gone from the study. The small framed photograph of Aunt Denise's Sunday dinner, the one he used to ignore because everyone in it looked too ordinary for his world, had disappeared from the shelf. Only the indentation remained in the dust, a perfect rectangle where a better version of his life had once stood. Madison lasted less than 3 months inside the truth of him. She had loved the version of William that arrived with private cars, velvet ropes, and whispered importance. She had not loved the man sitting awake at 2 a.m, reading old emails from Naomi and discovering how many times she had saved him from mistakes he never thanked her for. Their ending was quiet, almost businesslike. Madison came to his office wearing a camel coat and a careful expression. She said the attention had become unhealthy. She said she needed distance. She said she had never meant to hurt anyone. William did not argue. He only looked at her and realized how easily people used gentle words to leave wreckage behind. After she walked out, he sat for a long time with his hands folded on the desk, the same desk where he had once signed documents without reading the human cost. That evening, he opened the archived foundation files. For the first time, he read Naomi's notes not as background material, but as proof of a mind he had failed to honor. There were letters from families who had received emergency housing grants, scholarship essays from students whose parents worked 2 jobs, budget revisions with Naomi's comments in the margins, each one careful, humane, exact. She had not built charity to decorate his name. She had built it like a shelter. The next morning, William attended a settlement meeting at Grace Whitman's office. Naomi was not there. Grace sat across from him in a charcoal suit, her silver-streaked hair pinned neatly, her calm sharper than anger. Mrs. Brooks Prescott is willing to finalize terms without unnecessary escalation, she said. She is not interested in revenge. She is interested in accuracy, ownership, and peace. William stared at the empty chair beside Grace, where he had imagined Naomi might sit. The emptiness disciplined him. "Does she hate me?" he asked before he could stop himself. Grace closed the folder slowly. "That is not a legal question." "No," William said, his voice low. "It is just the only one I have left." Grace studied him, not unkindly. "Hate is still a kind of attachment, Mr. Prescott. Naomi is working very hard to be free." The sentence followed him for days. Free. Not richer, not admired, not victorious over him. Free. It was a word he had used casually his entire life, yet he had never understood its cost for someone who had to fight to own her own name. In Brooklyn, Naomi's work expanded faster than she expected. Community centers from Newark to Baltimore invited her to speak. A credit union offered partnership funding. A retired judge volunteered to teach legal literacy seminars once a month. Women began bringing their daughters to her workshops, not because they were planning for heartbreak, but because they were planning for life. One Saturday afternoon, Naomi stood outside the Harlem Community Center after a session, watching a mother and daughter walk down the sidewalk together, their heads bent over a folder of financial worksheets. Aunt Denise stood beside her with 2 paper cups of coffee. "Look at that," Denise said softly. Naomi smiled, small and real. "That is what I wanted." "No," Denise corrected gently. "That is what you became." Across the city, William finally understood the difference between losing a wife and losing the woman who had been teaching him how to become worthy of one. The regret did not redeem him. Not yet. But for the first time, it did not ask Naomi to carry it. 1 year after the brunch that changed everything, Naomi Brooks stood beneath the crystal lights of the Grand Astoria Ballroom, not as someone's wife, not as a borrowed name on a donor wall, but as the founder of an organization that now carried her own. The Brooks Foundation for Financial Dignity had outgrown borrowed classrooms, church basements, and community center folding chairs faster than anyone expected. What began at Aunt Denise's kitchen table had become a national network of legal clinics, credit education workshops, emergency housing grants, and scholarship programs for women rebuilding their lives with clear eyes and steady hands. The ballroom was filled with people who understood the difference between charity and dignity. There were teachers from Queens, nurses from Atlanta, single mothers from Baltimore, retired judges, credit union officers, social workers, college students, and women who had once believed they were alone until Naomi taught them that knowledge could be a kind of shelter. Naomi wore a deep emerald gown that moved softly when she walked, the color rich against her dark skin, her hair swept back to reveal the small gold earrings her mother had worn to church every Sunday. No diamonds from William. No Prescott pearls. Nothing borrowed from a life that had asked her to shine only when it benefited someone else. On her wrist was her mother's bracelet, simple and thin, more precious than every jewel locked in the Prescott family vault. Aunt Denise stood near the front table, smiling with tears in her eyes, pretending to adjust the program so no one would notice how proud she was. Grace Whitman sat beside her, elegant and composed, though even she softened when the first scholarship recipient took the stage. Her name was Marisol Rivera, a nursing student from the Bronx who had nearly left school after her divorce ruined her credit and drained her savings. Through the foundation, she had received legal guidance, financial coaching, and tuition support. "Miss Brooks did not just help me understand money," Marisol said, her voice trembling but clear. "She helped me understand that needing help did not make me small." The applause rose slowly, then filled the room like rain after a long drought. Naomi pressed her fingers lightly against her bracelet and breathed through the ache of gratitude. She had spent so many years in rooms where applause belonged to men who took credit for women's labor. Tonight, every clap felt returned to its rightful owner. Then the ballroom doors opened. The shift was subtle, but Naomi felt it before she saw him. William Prescott stood at the entrance in a black suit, older somehow, not in years, but in certainty lost. He did not arrive with photographers. He did not bring an assistant. He carried no flowers, no dramatic apology, no performance wrapped in luxury. For the first time since Naomi had known him, he looked like a man entering a room he knew he had no right to command. A few guests turned. Whispers moved, then faded. Naomi remained still. Grace's eyes narrowed slightly, but Naomi gave the smallest shake of her head. Not fear, not permission, only control. William walked toward her slowly, stopping several feet away, leaving space between them like a boundary he had finally learned to see. Naomi, he said. Her name sounded different in his mouth now, less like possession, more like confession. William. The room seemed to quiet around them, though the music continued softly near the stage. He looked at the banners bearing her foundation's name, the tables filled with women whose lives she had touched, the photographs on the walls showing workshops, graduation ceremonies, signed leases, small businesses opened, families steadied. You built something extraordinary, he said. Naomi looked at him calmly. I built something necessary. He lowered his eyes, accepting the correction without defense. That, more than his words, told her he had changed in at least one small way. I came to say what I should have said long before it cost me anything, he continued. You were never lucky to stand beside me. I was blessed to stand beside you, and I mistook your grace for something I could spend without consequence. Naomi felt the sentence enter the room, heavy and imperfect, but honest enough to remain. Around them, people listened not for scandal, but for accountability. William's voice became quieter. I am sorry for the brunch. I am sorry for Madison. I am sorry for letting my family, my company, and my pride turn you into a symbol when you were a person. I am sorry I called your strength difficult because it made my weakness visible. For a moment, Naomi saw him not as the man who had humiliated her, and not as the man the world had once admired, but as a human being standing in the difficult light of what he had done. She did not feel the old pull to rescue him from that discomfort. That was how she knew she was free. I accept your apology, she said. William's face moved with relief too quickly, and Naomi saw it, the old hope, the old instinct that forgiveness might become a doorway back to what he lost. She let the silence teach him before her words did. But forgiveness is not an invitation to return. His relief faded, not into anger, but into understanding. Naomi's voice stayed gentle. I hope you become better, William. I truly do. But my healing cannot be your reward. Behind her, Aunt Denise closed her eyes as if hearing a prayer answered. William nodded once, slowly, and stepped back. No argument. No bargain. No claim. Naomi turned toward the stage as her name was called, and when she walked into the light, the room rose to its feet. She did not look back to see whether William was still watching. For the first time, it did not matter. The applause belonged to the women who had rebuilt themselves, to the girls learning early what their mothers learned late, and to the truth that love without respect was not love at all, only a beautiful room with no foundation beneath it. The final papers were signed on a bright Thursday morning in January, in a quiet conference room on Madison Avenue where the windows looked down over a city washed clean by overnight snow. Naomi arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a camel coat over a navy dress, her mother's bracelet resting against her wrist, her hair pinned back with the same calm precision that had carried her through boardrooms, court filings, community workshops, and lonely evenings when healing felt less like triumph and more like learning how to breathe without asking permission. Grace Whitman sat beside her with a slim folder, the last pages marked with small blue tabs. Across the table, William Prescott entered without an entourage, without his mother, without the sharp shine of a man expecting the room to bend around him. He looked rested, but not proud. Changed, perhaps, though Naomi no longer needed his change in order to trust her own life. The settlement had been completed with fairness and clarity. Naomi retained independent control of the Brooks Foundation for financial dignity. Her contributions to the former Prescott programs were formally acknowledged. The compensation clause would fund legal education workshops in 12 cities during the next 2 years. Nothing in the agreement was designed to ruin William. Everything in it was designed to tell the truth. Grace reviewed the final page in her steady voice, then slid the pen toward Naomi. For one brief moment, Naomi looked at the signature line where her married name waited like an old coat she no longer intended to wear. Naomi Brooks Prescott. It had once sounded like arrival, then obligation, then a room with no windows. She signed carefully, not with anger, but with release. Naomi Brooks. The pen moved across the paper like a door opening. William watched the name appear, and something in his face softened with the understanding that the woman before him was not being taken from him by lawyers, clauses, or public opinion. She had returned to herself. When it was his turn, he signed without comment. The silence that followed was not empty. It was complete. Grace gathered the documents, gave Naomi a small nod, and stepped out to make copies, leaving them alone for the first time since the life they had built had become something neither of them could save. William looked down at his hands. "Did you ever love me?" he asked quietly. Naomi turned toward the window. Below, people crossed the sidewalk in winter coats, careful on the slick pavement, each carrying somewhere to go. She could have answered quickly. She could have made the question hurt. But cruelty had never been her language, even when pain had given her reason to learn it. "Yes," she said. "I loved you enough to build beside you. I loved you enough to tell you the truth when everyone else applauded you for being wrong. I loved you enough to stay longer than I should have." William closed his eyes. Naomi continued, her voice gentle but unshaken. "But I finally loved myself enough to leave." He nodded once, and this time he did not reach for her, did not ask for another chance, did not try to turn her forgiveness into shelter for his regret. "I hope the foundation becomes everything you wanted," he said. Naomi stood, lifting her coat from the back of the chair. "It already has," she replied. "Not because it is large, but because it is useful." In the hallway, Grace handed her the certified copies. Aunt Denise was waiting near the elevator in a wool hat and burgundy scarf, holding 2 cups of coffee, as if the morning were not historic, just cold. When she saw Naomi, she did not ask if it was finished. She knew by the way Naomi walked. Denise handed her a cup and kissed her cheek. "Ready?" Naomi smiled, small and real. "Yes." They stepped out onto Madison Avenue, where the snow along the curb had begun to melt into silver water, and the sun broke between the buildings with quiet insistence. Naomi paused at the corner, breathing in the sharp air. For years, she had thought freedom would feel loud, like applause, vindication, or the final word in a room that once dismissed her. Instead, it felt like this: coffee warming her hands, her aunt beside her, her own name on legal paper, and a calendar filled with work that made other women safer. Later that afternoon, she would meet with a group of high school seniors in Newark to teach them about credit, contracts, and the courage to ask questions before signing anything that touched their future. She would tell them that love was beautiful when it was honest, that partnership should expand a person, not erase them, and that dignity was not pride, but the quiet knowledge that no one's status gave them permission to make another human being feel small. As she walked toward the waiting car, the city bright around her, Naomi touched the bracelet on her wrist and thought of her mother, of Aunt Denise's kitchen, of every woman who had written to say she felt less alone. She did not feel like a woman who had escaped ruin. She felt like a woman who had discovered that endings, when met with truth, could become inheritance. Behind her, somewhere high above the avenue, William remained with the consequences of what he had lost. Ahead of her, Naomi Brooks carried forward what no betrayal had been able to take: her name, her work, her mercy, and the unshakable understanding that the most powerful revenge was never destruction. It was becoming whole, then helping others rise whole beside you.